Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want us to have a discussion about why the United States is losing its grip on power throughout the entire world. Okay, so for many years people have been saying that money printing is bad. Okay, and they used to try and cover up the money printing by, instead of using the word printing, they were saying borrowing. Okay, and that was kind of working for a while. All right, so people were kind of believing this borrowing idea right up until the point where they started borrowing $1 trillion at a time. Okay, so when we get up to the number trillion, all of a sudden economists around the world basically had cold water splashed in their faces, and they realized that there's no such thing as borrowing $1 trillion. Okay, so to put things into perspective, 1 million seconds is 30 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 months. 1 trillion seconds is 31,000 years. Okay, so the number trillion, all right, should not exist unless we're talking about molecules or we're talking about stars. Okay, so there's no borrowing $1 trillion from anybody, because $1 trillion doesn't exist. It's just money that's being, created in a computer. You have to create in a computer because you don't have enough paper in the world to actually print out that amount of imaginary money. Okay, so at the point where they started borrowing or printing up $1 trillion at a time and calling it borrowing, everybody in the world that does economics realized that the United States was just printing up money, which, you know what, they kind of went along with it. They didn't complain too much. They were sort of benefiting from it. And the United States was benefiting by taxing the entire world, right? Because anytime the U.S. government basically prints up more money, they're diluting the existing money. By diluting the existing money, they're basically reducing your buying power. So that's how they're not only just taxing U.S. citizens, they are taxing the entire world. And there's more, like 10, 20, 100 times more money outside of the United States. There's probably 100 times U.S. dollars outside the United States than inside of the United States. So the way that they were paying for those, multi-billion-dollar aircraft carriers and submarines and all that stuff was by taxing the entire world. Okay, and the economists around the world were aware of this, right? They knew this. They were willing to kind of tolerate it right up until the point where they started basically yanking money away from countries that they did not like. Okay, so initially it started off with, hey, we're gonna seize the financial assets of the drug dealers. All right, and nobody complained too much about that. Then they said they were going to seize the financial assets, basically the money, of the terrorists. Okay, maybe there was a little bit of grumbling about that, but not too much. They are terrorists after all. And then all of a sudden they declared Russia a terrorist state, and they decided that they were going to seize Russia's money. Okay, the money that the U.S. dollars that Russia was holding, or they were going to make it impossible for them to use U.S. dollars in the course of business. Listen, nothing could have made the Russians happier. Okay, you got all these stupid generals that get on TV and they think that they're winning this war in Ukraine because they blew up so many tanks, or basically there was an offensive there. That's the distraction. Okay, this war is not going to be won on the ground. This is a financial war. Okay, the way that the Russians are winning this war, and probably have won the war already, is they were able to stand up and say to the world, hey, look what the United States did to us. They took away our money, right? Because even though these are U.S. dollars, okay, they belonged to the Russians. Okay, so the money that the Russians hold, or the terrorists hold, or the drug dealers hold, that's their money. Okay, if they are doing something illegal, okay, or inhumane or whatever, if they're committing war crimes to get that money, then you deal with the actions. You don't go after the money that's in the bank accounts, right, that you happen to be holding. Because what's happening here is when the United States establishes itself as the world's financial reserve or currency reserve, and they say, hey, the whole world's going to operate on our U.S. dollars, the United States has what we call a fiduciary responsibility, okay, fiduciary responsibility to put other people's interests ahead of their own, okay? So that's the nature of a fiduciary responsibility. So my background's accounting, okay? If I accept somebody as a client and I'm advising them, okay, I can't advise them to do certain business transactions that will just create more work and allow me to do more billing, okay? So even though it might be in my benefit to say, hey, do things this way because I will have more billable hours, okay? I have a fiduciary responsibility to work to put the interest of my client ahead of my own interest. So despite the fact that, hey, this way over here might result in more billable hours for me, this way over here is better for my client. Because of my fiduciary responsibility, I'm obligated to put the client's interest ahead of my own interest. That's a fiduciary responsibility. So that's where the United States went wrong, okay? They established themselves as the world's currency reserve. They said, hey, everybody, we're going to do business on the U.S. dollar. What the United States failed to do is put the interests of other people ahead of their own, since they have accepted that fiduciary responsibility. So they started off with the drug dealers, then they went to the terrorists, right? And then finally they went to the country. They went to an entire country, right? And then that country stood up and said, hey, world, look what the United States did to us. Nobody cares about blowing up a couple of tanks here and there. Look what the United States did to us. They took our money. If they can do this to us, they can do this to you. So now you got China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Brazil, and plus a whole bunch of other companies, all working together to get away from the U.S. dollar, because the United States has proven to the world that they will use the U.S. currency as a weapon to try and punish countries when they don't do exactly what they want, okay? So that's why, and here's the thing, when that happens, as the world shifts away from the U.S. dollar, what's going to happen is, on top of all the money printing that's happening here in the United States to devalue our currency, what's going to happen is all that external currency that's floating around the world, that's in, I don't know, Chinese banks, that's in Brazilian banks, that's in Indian banks, that's in Pakistani banks. All that money is basically going to end up coming back here, and it's going to devalue our money even further. So, and this all happened since 2020, all right? I mean, the money printing was happening before 2020, but the tipping point was when the United States decided to have a financial war with Russia, and you know, fine, they made it. By the way, I did a separate video on this. I think that the reason why the United States was rushing out of Afghanistan and leaving military assets behind is because they already had a plan to have a more exciting war in Ukraine. Okay, that was already in the plan. So they rushed out of Afghanistan so that they can, you know, prepare themselves to have this beautiful, exciting war in Ukraine. And they thought that it was all going to be on the ground, and they were going to blow up tanks, and they were going to get to test out their new military equipment, because they were getting bored with, you know, just guys shooting at each other with rifles out in Afghanistan. So they wanted to have a more exciting war in Ukraine, where they would get a chance to test out their new toys, right? So that's where they were being focused on, and they thought that they were going to punish the Russians financially. Well, the only people that are getting punished here is the United States, okay? I feel that what has happened now with the entire world shifting away from, you know, from the U.S. dollar, that's not fixable, okay? That's you know, that's not something that's easily correctable, because the United States has already established this pattern of using of basically taking U.S. dollars away from anybody that they don't like, anybody that doesn't do the things that they want to do. So you probably have these generals now, they're sitting there and they're saying, hey, no problem, who cares? We got the tanks, we got the ships, we got the aircraft carriers, we got all these beautiful things, you know, who cares about the money? Well, the generals, right, they don't understand, because they're not financial people, that the way that those things are being paid for is by taxing the entire world through inflation, right? And then once the entire world, as the world starts to shift away from the US dollar, you're not going to be able to tax the entire world. So at some point, you're not going to be able to pay for all those aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines, okay? So what are they going to do? What are their options? Because I'm pretty sure they've got people that are at least as smart as me in Washington thinking about this here, and I think that the most likely solution is that because if they're thinking that, hey, you got all these companies, all these countries that are trying to unite and work against, you know, unite and basically form their own currency to compete with the U.S. dollar. I think that the only solution that the solution that they're going to come up with, which is kind of like the default solution, is, hey, what assets do we actually have, right? You know, we don't have manufacturing. We've already shipped that abroad. What assets do we have? Well, we got a military. We got all these aircraft carriers. We got all these submarines. We got all these missiles that are going to have a limited life, right? Because within, I don't know, 20 to 50 years, those things are going to start rotting out, right? Because unless you're able to keep printing up money and taxing the world to maintain those things are going to start degrading. So I'm thinking that the solution that the geniuses in Washington are going to come up with is, while we have these assets that are in, you know, tip-top shape, we got to use them. Because if we don't use them now, we're not going to be able to use them 25, 50 years from now. So I think that the United States has put itself in a position where their only option is to start a worldwide war, okay? In order to prevent, you know, countries like China, Russia, India, Pakistan, you know, Brazil, all these countries from forming their own currencies. What I think they're going to do is they're going to come up with some plan that, hey, let's disrupt those efforts through World War III. So my thoughts on this, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if what I'm saying makes sense to you guys. I'm looking forward to reading the comments below. Talk to you all soon. Oh, by the way, this video is not going to be up for too long, because this is the type of video that's going to get me strikes and basically get my channel suspended. I already had one channel that was shut down, so I'm going to probably keep this up for about a week. That'll give this time to get copied over to the alternate platforms that I have, like HugeTube, Rumble, Odyssey, which is the other one? There's another one out there. BitChute. That'll give this a chance to get copied over to the other platforms. Make sure you're also following me on those other platforms. Now, the videos always pop up here first, because once I upload here, then it feeds all the other platforms, and I don't have to upload to each one individually. So that's why it always comes up here first, and then what I'll do is within a few days, I will delete it from here so I don't get strikes, okay? But make sure you follow me also on the other platforms. So talk to you all soon.